Keanu Reeves had it all. He was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, adored by millions of fans worldwide. His career soared with iconic roles, bringing him fame, money, and success. Yet, despite his outward success, something began to unravel behind the scenes. The industry that once adored him started to shift. The movies he starred in began to falter, not because of his talent, but because the magic that once connected with audiences seemed to disappear. A string of box office failures followed, and slowly, Keanu was pushed out of the spotlight. The calls from agents stopped coming. Directors no longer saw him as the leading man, and roles that once seemed destined for him now went to younger, more marketable faces. The fame he once had started to feel like a distant memory. In the blink of an eye, Keanu went from the shining star to a forgotten relic. He found himself drifting, trying to stay relevant in an industry that had already moved on. As the roles dried up, Keanu faced another nightmare: financial ruin. His agent, who had been managing his investments, turned out to be dishonest, embezzling a significant portion of Keanu's wealth. The realization hit hard when Keanu received a call from his accountant, revealing that his finances were in disarray. The money he had spent lavishly on luxurious homes, cars, and extravagant parties was now gone. What was once a thriving fortune had been reduced to nothing more than an empty shell. Keanu tried to sell off assets, but the value had plummeted. The real estate market had collapsed, and his homes were worth a fraction of what he had paid for them. Despite his best efforts to manage the fallout, Keanu was left with nothing but bills piling up and debts he couldn't repay. The lavish lifestyle was a distant memory, replaced by financial pressure that weighed heavily on him every day. As if losing his career and fortune wasn't enough, Keanu faced the harshest blow of all: personal loss. His longtime partner, someone he had trusted deeply, left him, unable to cope with the constant pressure of their public life. They had built their relationship on love and mutual respect, but the stress of Keanu's fall from grace proved too much. She walked away, leaving him broken-hearted and alone. His closest friends, the ones who had supported him during his rise, began to distance themselves, unsure of how to help or what to say. Keanu, now isolated, found himself retreating into a life of loneliness. The friends he had once turned to for advice had all turned their backs, leaving him with nothing but the echo of his own thoughts. The man who had been surrounded by adoration and admiration now sat in silence, wondering where everything had gone wrong. The pain of losing his career, wealth, and love all at once became almost too much to bear. It seemed as though Keanu had hit rock bottom. His life had been reduced to nothing more than memories of a past he could no longer recognize. But just when he thought things couldn't get worse, he received an unexpected letter. No return address, no name, just his initials, KR, on the envelope. Inside, a small, weathered key and a note: "Go where it all began." He stared at the key in confusion. What did it mean? Where was he supposed to go? The note seemed to be a riddle, but Keanu felt a strange pull, as if the answer was right in front of him. The cryptic message triggered a flash of memories: his childhood home, a place he hadn't visited in years. Could it be that the answer to his problems lay somewhere in his past, in a place where it all started before the fame, the wealth, and the overwhelming pressures of Hollywood took over? With a mixture of curiosity and desperation, Keanu decided to follow the strange message and set out on a journey that would change his life forever. Keanu stood there, staring at the weathered key in his hand. The cryptic message had ignited something deep inside him, an instinct, a desire for change. He couldn't explain it, but something about those words felt right. Go where it all began. The note seemed to point toward his childhood home, a place he hadn't thought about in years. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that it was the one place where he could truly escape the pressures of his public life. He packed a small bag, not knowing what awaited him, but knowing he had nothing left to lose. There was a sense of urgency now. He couldn't stay in the world that had rejected him, that had left him broken. The only way forward was to go back, to revisit the past and find the person he once was before fame and success took over his life. With the key in his pocket and his heart heavy with uncertainty, Keanu made the decision to leave Los Angeles behind and embark on a journey into the unknown. The drive took hours, and as Keanu approached the old neighborhood, a wave of nostalgia hit him. The streets looked different, but the feeling of familiarity remained. He had grown up in a modest house on a quiet street, a place where he had once found comfort in the simplicity of life. The house had always been a refuge, filled with love and memories of a time before the world had taken him by storm. As he turned onto the street, he saw the house in the distance. It was much older now, the paint peeling, the windows covered with dust and grime. Time had not been kind to it, but there was something about the place that felt like a relic of his former self, something that might still hold the key to his redemption. Keanu parked his car and stood there for a moment, just looking at the house. The memories flooded back, his childhood dreams, the times when he felt hopeful and free. The man he was before Hollywood had made him someone else. Keanu approached the front door, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never imagined he would return to this place under such circumstances. The house was abandoned, its doors locked, but the key from the mysterious letter fit perfectly. Slowly, he turned the key in the lock and pushed the door open. The inside of the house was just as he remembered it, though much more decayed. The walls were bare, and the floor creaked with every step he took. Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs hung in the corners like silent witnesses to years of neglect. Yet, despite the decay, the house felt oddly familiar, like a ghost of his former life was still lingering within its walls. As Keanu walked through the rooms, he could hear the echoes of laughter and the sound of his younger self running through these very halls. It was here that he had dreamed of becoming an actor, of changing the world. But somewhere along the way, those dreams had been overshadowed by the demands of fame and fortune. As he wandered deeper into the house, Keanu found himself in the small room where he used to study. His mother had always encouraged him to read and learn, to find solace in books. The room, though covered in dust, still held the remnants of his childhood. He noticed a bookshelf in the corner, its contents scattered and disorganized. As he reached for a book, his hand brushed against something odd, a small folded piece of paper wedged between the pages. Keanu pulled it out and read the note written in his mother's handwriting. True wealth comes not from what you earn, but from what you give. His heart skipped a beat. He remembered how his mother had always taught him the value of giving, of helping others. The message was clear. It wasn't about the fame or the money. It was about finding purpose in life through service to others. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, Keanu felt something shift within him. He realized that the secret to his transformation wasn't going to be found in Hollywood or in the material things he had once chased. It was going to come from within, from rediscovering the values that had shaped him as a person. long before he became a star. Keanu stood in the quiet room, the weight of his mother's message still lingering in his mind. True wealth comes not from what you earn, but from what you give. The words resonated deeply with him, striking a chord he hadn't felt in years. He had spent so much of his life chasing success and wealth, but now, standing in the house where it all began, he realized how much he had missed the simple things. His mother's wisdom, so often ignored in the pursuit of fame, now felt like the key to his redemption. Keanu knew that if he wanted to rebuild his life, he needed to find a new direction, one that didn't revolve around the fame, fortune, or external validation he had once craved. He could no longer be the man who had everything but felt empty inside. The life he was living before his fall from grace was not sustainable. He had to rediscover purpose beyond the superficial world he had been part of. With newfound clarity, Keanu made the decision to leave behind the remnants of his old life. He would step away from the industry that had once consumed him, seeking something more meaningful and fulfilling. Keanu's decision was not an easy one. Walking away from everything he had worked so hard for felt like admitting defeat, but deep down, he knew it was the only way to find peace. He moved back to Los Angeles, but this time, he didn't return to the glamour or the movie sets. Instead, he sought out ways to help others. Keanu began volunteering at local shelters, soup kitchens, and community centers. He spent his days working alongside people who had faced struggles far greater than his own. It was humbling. For the first time in years, he wasn't the center of attention. There were no photographers or fans around. He was just another person trying to make a difference. The work was hard and often thankless, but Keanu found satisfaction in it that he had never felt on a movie set. He began to realize that the love and respect he had once sought from the world were empty compared to the genuine gratitude he received from those whose lives he touched. The humility in these acts of service opened his eyes to a new reality. It wasn't fame that defined a man, but his capacity to help others. Keanu's journey to rediscover himself wasn't just about the work he did. It was about the people he met along the way. Through his volunteer work, he encountered individuals from all walks of life, each with their own struggles and dreams. One particular person stood out to him, a young artist named Mia, who had fallen on hard times after losing her family's support. Despite her circumstances, Mia was determined to pursue her passion for painting. She had been living in a shelter and often used what little money she had to buy supplies. Keanu saw something in her, a drive and determination that reminded him of his younger self. Mia's story touched him deeply, and he realized that this was his calling. It was no longer about helping those in need only. It was about giving people the tools and opportunities to help themselves. Keanu began mentoring Mia, helping her connect with art collectors and galleries. He didn't do it for fame or recognition, but because he saw her potential and believed in her dream. Their connection was built on mutual respect and understanding, an emotional bond that was real, not transactional. As the months passed, Keanu's life began to take on new meaning. His work with Mia, as well as other people he encountered in his volunteer work, started to fill him with a sense of fulfillment he had never known in Hollywood. Keanu realized that the wealth his mother had spoken of, the wealth that came from giving, was not about accumulating riches, but about creating a legacy of positive impact. He wasn't looking to be remembered for his acting career, but for the lives he touched and the ways in which he had helped people discover their potential. He no longer cared about being a Hollywood icon. He wanted to be a beacon of hope for those who needed it most. He used his platform to raise awareness for various causes and to encourage others to contribute to the community. Keanu's reputation began to shift. People no longer saw him as a former star trying to cling to fame, but as a genuine philanthropist who had rediscovered his humanity. The fame he once sought so desperately now seemed insignificant compared to the sense of purpose he had found. And for the first time in a long time, Keanu felt truly at peace with who he had become. Months passed, and Keanu's life was unrecognizable from the days of Hollywood fame. He had found purpose in his newfound work, but something was still missing. He had given up the spotlight, money, and luxury, but there was still a lingering sense that there was something deeper he needed to discover. Was there more to this journey than just helping others? Despite all the progress he had made, Keanu felt that the true secret to his transformation still eluded him. It wasn't until one evening, after a long day of work at a local outreach center, that Keanu sat down to reflect. He thought about his mother's words, about his rise and fall, about all the moments of loss and growth. Then it struck him. What if the secret he had been looking for wasn't something external, like wealth or fame? What if it was something within himself? Keanu realized that for all his external achievements, he had never truly discovered his own inner strength. He had always looked outward for answers, for validation, but never within. The journey he had embarked on wasn't just about rebuilding his life. It was about reclaiming his authentic self. Keanu's realization sent waves of clarity through him. He understood now that true change came not from the things he had done, but from how he viewed himself. For years, he had defined himself through external measures, his fame, his career, his wealth. But in abandoning those things, he had found a new understanding of who he truly was, beyond all of the labels and expectations. The secret that changed everything was this: self-acceptance. Keanu stopped seeing himself as a man who had lost everything. Instead, he began to see himself as someone who had gained so much more. He had gained wisdom, humility, and the ability to live a life that aligned with his values. For the first time in years, Keanu felt truly free, not because he had shed his wealth or his fame, but because he had shed the need for validation from others. He understood now that the most important relationship he could have was the one with himself. He was no longer trying to live up to an image or a persona. He was simply being Keanu. The more Keanu reflected on this new truth, the more he realized he needed to share it with others. People were still struggling, still looking for meaning and purpose in a world that often felt empty. They were chasing fame, money, and recognition, just as he had once done, believing that these things would bring fulfillment. But Keanu knew now that this was a false path. True fulfillment came from within, and he wanted to share that message with the world. He began speaking at public events, not as a former star, but as a man who had rediscovered his purpose. He shared his story of loss, transformation, and the power of self-realization. At first, people were skeptical. After all, Keanu Reeves had been the epitome of Hollywood success. What could he possibly know about living a humble, authentic life? But as he spoke, something began to shift. His vulnerability, his authenticity, and his message resonated with people on a deeper level. Keanu was no longer just a celebrity. He was a guide for others on their own paths to self-discovery. As Keanu continued to share his message, something remarkable happened. People started coming to him, telling him how his story had inspired them to change their own lives. They spoke of how they had been stuck in their careers, in their own struggles, and had been seeking external validation just as Keanu had. But after hearing his words, they were able to look inward, to find the strength to redefine their own lives. Keanu realized that the real legacy he would leave behind wasn't his work in film or his once glamorous life. It was the impact he had on others. His true success wasn't about his Hollywood career. It was about helping others find their inner strength, just as he had found his. The secret that had changed his life wasn't just a key to his personal transformation. It was a key that could unlock the potential in everyone around him. And so, Keanu's journey came full circle. He had found what he had been searching for all along. Not fame, not wealth, but inner peace and purpose. He had lost everything. But in doing so, he had found the most valuable thing of all, himself. Keanu's new journey was not just a personal one. It began to have an effect on those around him. People who had been in similar situations, lost and searching for meaning, began to take notice of the changes in him. His quiet wisdom and dedication to a life of service began to inspire others. As Keanu continued volunteering, mentoring, and speaking at various events, he saw firsthand the ripple effect his transformation was causing. People came to him not asking for autographs, but for guidance, support, and a new perspective on life. The message was clear. They wanted to learn how he had gone from being a Hollywood icon to a humble servant of humanity. Keanu didn't have all the answers, but he knew that his example was enough to inspire those who were still lost in the same way he once had been. Slowly but surely, he was helping others realize that they too could change their lives, that they didn't need fame or riches to feel fulfilled. It was about inner peace, authenticity, and the courage to step away from societal expectations. Keanu's work began to garner attention from both his peers and the media, but in a completely different way than before. He was no longer a tabloid sensation or a reclusive figure avoiding the limelight. He became a symbol of transformation. Celebrities, fans, and even public figures reached out to him, seeking advice or simply wanting to learn from his example. It wasn't about how much wealth one accumulated or how many movies they starred in. It was about what one gave back to the world. Keanu's message was that true wealth came from within, and it was about living a life of integrity and compassion. As his work gained momentum, Keanu decided to expand his outreach. He started a foundation focused on mental health and personal development, aiming to help others who struggled with the same challenges he had faced. It wasn't just about giving back money or resources, it was about giving people the tools to rebuild their own lives. Keanu saw this foundation not as a way to repair his own reputation, but as an opportunity to create a lasting legacy that would outlive his career and fame. Despite his newfound purpose and the positive impact he was making, Keanu still found moments of solitude. As much as he enjoyed helping others, he also understood the importance of finding peace within himself. There were days when he longed for the quiet of his old life, where he could simply be alone without the weight of expectations. But instead of feeling regret, he embraced these moments of solitude. They allowed him to reflect on how far he had come, from the broken man who had lost everything to the man who now understood that his worth was not tied to external achievements. In these quiet moments, Keanu would often return to the lessons his mother had taught him and the message he had discovered on his journey, that giving, true giving, wasn't about money or recognition. It was about love, kindness, and vulnerability. He also began to write down his thoughts and reflections, hoping that one day Others could learn from his experiences. His writing became an outlet for him to process everything he had learned, and it allowed him to share his inner journey with the world. As the years passed, Keanu's life had changed in ways he could never have imagined. He had gone from being one of Hollywood's biggest stars to someone who had found deep meaning in serving others. He realized that he had not lost everything. He had gained something far more valuable than fame or fortune. Through his experiences, Keanu had found his true purpose: to be a force of change, to help others, and to live a life that was authentic and fulfilling. One day, after speaking at an event about his journey, Keanu stood backstage, looking at the audience. He could see the faces of people who were just like him, searching for meaning, struggling with the weight of the world. He thought about how far he had come and how much he had grown. In that moment, Keanu realized that his true success wasn't measured by the number of movies he made or the wealth he accumulated. It was measured by the lives he had touched, the difference he had made, and the love he had shared. His journey had come full circle, from losing everything to finding the one thing that had always eluded him: peace, purpose, and self-fulfillment. Despite the progress Keanu had made, there were still moments when the weight of his past life pressed on him. The doubts that he had long buried would sometimes resurface, clouding his mind. Was he really on the right path? Was all this giving and changing worth it? In moments of deep reflection, Keanu couldn't help but wonder if he had made the right choice by leaving his former life behind. Hollywood had given him fame, admiration, and wealth, things many people dreamed of. Now, he was a man who was no longer recognized for his career, but for the work he did to help others. While he found joy in this new life, there were still moments when the contrast between his past and present life felt jarring. Had he lost his identity in the process? His doubts gnawed at him, making him question if he had given up too much. But the truth was, these doubts were simply part of his ongoing journey, and Keanu knew he needed to face them head-on. He couldn't avoid them any longer. During one of his periods of uncertainty, Keanu reached out to an old friend from his Hollywood days, someone who had been with him during the highs and lows of his career. This friend had always known Keanu to be a quiet, introspective man, but someone who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. Keanu confided in him about the doubts he had been experiencing. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing," Keanu admitted. "I've stepped away from everything I knew, and now I'm not sure if I've lost too much. I feel like there's still something missing." His friend listened intently and then responded, "Keanu, you're a man who has always sought meaning. You didn't just walk away from fame and wealth, you walked toward something more important. Sometimes the hardest journey is the one we take to find peace within ourselves. You're not supposed to have it all figured out. The journey is the purpose." This conversation sparked something inside Keanu. He had always been someone who was comfortable with uncertainty, and now, his doubts weren't a sign of failure. They were part of the ongoing evolution of his life. The reassurance from his friend helped him understand that his doubts didn't invalidate his journey. They were a natural part of it. The conversation with his friend helped Keanu shift his perspective. He began to realize that the doubts he had were not a sign that he was on the wrong path, but a reminder that change was constant. He had been so focused on finding the right way to live after his transformation that he had forgotten one essential truth. Life wasn't about having all the answers. It was about embracing the journey, with all its uncertainty. Keanu stopped seeing his doubts as a weakness. Instead, he began to see them as a tool for growth. When doubts arose, he didn't try to push them away. He sat with them, understood them, and allowed them to be a part of his process. He also reached out to others who had gone through similar transformations, listening to their experiences and learning that doubt was a natural part of personal evolution. Keanu realized that doubt wasn't something to fear. It was a sign that he was pushing himself to grow, to question, and to evolve. This new understanding allowed him to embrace uncertainty and move forward with confidence, knowing that his journey would never be free of challenges. But that didn't mean it wasn't worth pursuing. Over time, Keanu's perspective shifted entirely. Instead of questioning his decisions, he began to celebrate the journey he had undertaken. He no longer saw the road ahead as something filled with doubt and fear. Instead, it was a path of endless possibilities, one where he could continue to grow, learn, and share. He had given up the things that once defined him, but in doing so, he had created a life that was more authentic, more fulfilling, and ultimately more meaningful. Keanu now understood that the real essence of life wasn't about avoiding mistakes or fears. It was about moving forward in the face of uncertainty and having the courage to be true to oneself. With a renewed sense of clarity, Keanu rededicated himself to the work he had started. He continued to help others, but this time he did it with a sense of peace and confidence that came from within. The doubts no longer controlled him. They had been transformed into opportunities for self-reflection and growth. As Keanu looked at his life, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't the same man who had stepped away from Hollywood. He was a man who had found his true self, and that was all that mattered. Block 1. New challenges on the horizon. Despite the peace Keanu had found, life had a way of throwing new challenges at him. His work with his foundation continued to grow, and with that growth came more responsibility. Keanu began to feel the weight of his mission, and the pressure to make a difference in the world seemed more daunting than ever. At times, he felt overwhelmed by the need to do more, to reach more people, to make a bigger impact. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was always more to be done. But this time, instead of retreating into self-doubt, Keanu paused and took a step back. He realized that his sense of urgency was rooted in a fear of not doing enough. He was trying to control everything as if he could solve every problem in the world. But deep down, he knew that true transformation didn't happen through sheer force of will. It happened through patience, trust, and allowing things to unfold naturally. For the first time in years, Keanu decided to slow down, to trust the process. He let go of the need to fix everything at once and focused on taking things one step at a time. Keanu's decision to trust the process was not an easy one. It required him to let go of control and accept that some things were out of his hands. But as he embraced this new mindset, something incredible happened. He began to notice the small victories along the way, the lives he touched through his foundation, the people who came to him for advice, and the quiet moments of connection that felt more meaningful than any award or recognition ever had. Keanu had been chasing something for so long, a sense of fulfillment that came from external validation. But now he understood that true fulfillment came from being present in the moment. By trusting the process, Keanu found peace in the everyday, in the simple acts of kindness, and in the growth that took place, not in giant leaps, but in small, steady steps. His work didn't need to be perfect, and he didn't need to have all the answers. What mattered was his intention to help, to serve, and to live with authenticity. In this shift, Keanu found a deeper sense of contentment than he had ever known before. As Keanu continued to trust the process, he began to realize that imperfection was not something to be feared. In fact, it was part of what made life beautiful. He had spent so many years trying to perfect his image, trying to meet others' expectations, and trying to be the best at everything he did. But now, he saw that the true beauty of life lay in its messiness, its unpredictability, and its flaws. He began to embrace imperfection, not just in the world around him, but in himself. Keanu had always been a perfectionist, but now he allowed himself to make mistakes, to stumble, and to learn from those experiences. He understood that mistakes were simply opportunities for growth, not signs of failure. This shift in perspective allowed Keanu to let go of the fear that had once held him back. He was no longer trying to be a perfect person, but rather a genuine one. And in that authenticity, he found a deeper connection to himself and to others. Keanu learned that perfection was never the goal. It was the journey, with all its imperfections, that made life truly worthwhile. With time, Keanu came to fully embrace the art of living in the present. He stopped looking back at the past with regret or longing for the future with anxiety. Instead, he focused on the here and now. His work, his relationships, and his own personal growth all became rooted in the present moment. Keanu had spent so much of his life chasing after something, whether it was fame, recognition, or a sense of purpose, that he had missed the richness of the moment he was living in. But now he understood that life was not something to be pursued. It was something to be experienced. Every conversation, every act of kindness, every challenge, and every moment of doubt became part of the tapestry of his life. Keanu realized that there was no need to rush toward an end goal. The true beauty of life was in the journey itself, the small, everyday moments that made up his existence. By trusting the process and letting go of his need for perfection, Keanu found a sense of peace that allowed him to enjoy life exactly as it was, in all its messy, unpredictable glory. Keanu stood at the edge of a cliff, looking out at the vast horizon, the sun slowly setting behind the mountains. This had been a place of solitude for him for years, a place where he came to clear his mind and reflect. Today was different. Today, he wasn't looking back at his past mistakes or wondering about his future. He simply was. For the first time in years, Keanu felt whole. The journey that had started with a loss, followed by doubt, and eventually led him to rediscover himself, had come full circle. He had no illusions about having all the answers, but he had found something far more valuable: inner peace. He had learned to let go of the need for validation, to stop chasing fleeting dreams, and to start living in alignment with his true self. Keanu smiled softly, thinking about the incredible people he had met along the way, the ones who, like him, had struggled to find their way and were now walking paths of purpose. In those moments of connection, he realized that he had given them something priceless: hope. Keanu's journey had inspired many, but now it was time for him to share it on his own terms. He decided to write a book, not as a celebrity memoir, but as a guide for others who were lost, struggling, or looking for purpose. He wasn't trying to teach anyone how to live his life, but rather to offer the lessons he had learned through his own journey. His story was one of struggle, loss, and transformation. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. Keanu wrote about the hard choices he had made, the moments of doubt that almost derailed him, and the quiet realization that peace comes not from external success, but from embracing who you truly are. He wanted people to understand that they didn't need fame or fortune to feel valued. Everyone had the power to change their lives, no matter where they started or how many mistakes they had made. Keanu's story wasn't just about him. It was a blueprint for anyone who wanted to embark on a journey of personal transformation. As Keanu's book was published and he continued to help others, he realized that he had fully let go of the past. His Hollywood days, the fame, the wealth, all of it had once felt like a part of him. But now, it was just a chapter. Keanu no longer defined himself by what he had or hadn't accomplished. He had freed himself from the need to be anything other than himself. Letting go of the past didn't mean forgetting it. It meant accepting it as part of his journey without letting it hold him back. Keanu began to understand that real freedom comes when you stop living for others and start living for yourself. He had let go of the pressure to be perfect, to live up to expectations, and to chase after things that didn't bring him true happiness. With each passing day, he felt more grounded in the present, more grateful for the life he had now. There were no more comparisons to what had been. There was only the now, only who he was becoming. Looking forward, Keanu saw endless possibilities. But unlike before, when he was driven by external goals, he now understood that his future was less about what he would achieve and more about who he would become. The old Keanu would have seen the future as a series of milestones to conquer. Now, he viewed it as a journey to embrace. Every step forward was an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to continue living with authenticity. He no longer feared what lay ahead. The lessons he had learned had prepared him for whatever challenges the future might bring. Keanu had come to understand that true success wasn't about living up to other people's expectations. It was about living with integrity and peace. Whatever the future held, he knew he would face it with the same heart and courage that had carried him through his most difficult days. In the end, Keanu realized that the secret he had discovered, the one that changed his life, was simple. Peace and purpose come from within, and it was up to each of us to create our own meaning in life.